My name is Haley Bell. I'm the training program manager with Telehealth Rocks, and I have the honor of facilitating today's session. We're really excited to have you here for the third session of our Echo Light training series, supporting the whole child, connecting brain health systems and practice. Today's session is focused on preventing and addressing youth gambling behaviors. Youth gambling is an often overlooked risk behavior with real implications for health and well-being, and definitely an issue that we've heard from many of you. So we're excited for today's session. And really the session today is going to emphasize the fact that we can't look at gambling in isolation, but really have to consider the whole child and systems around them. Next slide, please. So before we jump in, I do just want to take a quick minute to kind of re-ground us in what the series is. If you joined us before, just stick around for a second, but super excited to have some new names and faces on today. So the training series, it's an ongoing twice monthly learning series, really designed to build over time and grounded in the whole school, whole community, and whole child framework, otherwise known as WISC, which you might hear us refer to today. This really just gives us a shared way to think about how systems connect around children. We also want to make sure that these sessions are interactive. So each session, including today's, will include a case-based portion, really creating an environment where we can learn from one another and from other examples. The series is also designed for multiple disciplines and perspectives. So you'll see today that Ken and Jerry are two speakers, each bring their own perspective, and we're really hoping to carry this throughout the remainder of the series. And then everything in the series is really focused on that real world practice and collaboration. We really want you guys to walk away knowing how to implement different tools and resources in your day-to-day work and life. Next slide, please. I'm super excited to get to introduce today's speakers. So first we have Ken Winters. Ken Winters is a senior scientist at the Oregon Research Institute at the Minnesota location and a longstanding collaborator with NORC on adolescent SBIRT for substance use and mental health. He previously served as a professor in the University of Minnesota's Department of Psychiatry, where he founded and directed the Center for Adolescent Substance Abuse Research for 25 years. His work includes extensive training and research on evidence-based SBIRT, the brief negotiated interview model, and motivational interviewing with adolescents. Dr. Winters is also a nationally recognized expert in adolescent problem gambling, contributing key measurement tools, longitudinal studies, and widely cited publications that have advanced the understanding of youth gambling behaviors. So we're super excited to have him with us today. We're also joined by Jerry Bauerkemper. Mr. Bauerkemper was the first director of problem gambling for the state of Nebraska. He's also an internationally recognized trainer on problem gambling, and currently he's a consultant for the Iowa Gambling Program, helping agencies increase gambling utilization and provide training for professions in the helping professions field. So together, these two speakers that we have today are really going to bring that integrated perspective that we're really hoping to get with this series. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of today's session. It's really focused on teaching you all how to recognize early signs and risk factors associated with youth gambling and identify and respond when you're faced with a youth who might have an issue with gambling. For today's component, like I said, we're grounding everything in the whole school, whole community, whole child model. Today's session is hitting on the counseling, psychological, and social services piece of that model. Next slide, please. So before I hand it over to our presenters, I do just want to do a quick review of what our learning objectives are for the session. So by the end of the session, you should be able to recognize early signs and risk factors associated with youth gambling behaviors. You'll also be able to describe practical strategies for initiating conversations with youth about gambling and other related risks. And then finally, you'll be able to walk away being able to apply interdisciplinary approaches to the implementation of prevention and early intervention for youth gambling in school and community settings. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ken and Jerry to get us started.
Good morning. I guess I get to go first. My name's Jerry Bauerkemper. A little bit more about me. I have a current caseload. I do some telehealth, and the majority of my people that I am working with are sports gamblers, which will be a lot of what we talk about today in the area of adolescent gambling. So, but I want to start with the way that adolescent betting and gambling has changed over the years, and so that we can get a perspective on how we started and where we're at. And maybe you guys in the chat can add some things that you've noticed, the types of gambling and the way people are gambling now. So, first of all, many years ago, when I was young, I've been doing gambling since 1986. People growing up would bet cards with their parents. They'd play for matchsticks and then move on to pennies and then move on to being in the adult chair playing poker, etc. But that was basically gambling for kids when they were growing up, for adolescents, and even younger. Um, and then they would also bet with friends on who complete this task first. And an example, just a small example, would be something like, um, I can beat you to the corner, and we'll bet 20 cents, or we'll bet $1, or we'll bet for lunch, or whatever we'll do. Or so it didn't matter whether it was money, it could be something else, but they were wagering just as a matter of recourse, just to say who could complete this task better. And then we moved on, in about 1986, 87, and into the early 90s. The lotteries started, and I know Kansas has a lottery, and I know that there's Powerball and all of these things. Well, one of the things that happened was parents and grandparents started giving lottery tickets to their children and grandchildren for Christmas. And that's basically their first foray into legalized gambling. Now, we all know that you can't turn it in until you're 18, but you could scratch it, and it would became what I would call a learning period for legalized gambling. We moved on to betting in schools with bookies. Now, when I say bookies, I really mean runners, but bookies is a better term for this process, in that there were usually and still are in the high schools and some in the middle schools, people who are taking bets and then laying them off with the big bookies, the adult bookies, and they're betting on sports and other things. And that started to move into the high schools, most recently in the 1990s to 2000s. And then we started what I call betting at prom. And there was a phase, and it's still, some high schools might be doing that, where they would have prom night, and they would bring people and teach them basically how to gamble. They would give away prizes and things like that for doing betting. And speaking to some of the administrators and some of the teachers, they would say, well, it's better than drinking. And so they were basically teaching and helping people to learn how to bet, casino type betting. And then we started betting online. Yes, adolescents are betting online. It's not a very difficult process for adolescents to say they're 18 and to bet with casinos and online betting, FanDuel, things like that. And then now the most recent thing we are looking at is a thing called prediction markets. And that's fairly new. It's not new, but it's fairly new popular wise. And basically it's betting on anything you want via the stock market. And that, in a nutshell, I think the next pope is going to be XYZ, and then someone else will get on the prediction market, on the stock market, and say, no, I think it's going to be so and so, and they will bet against each other to see whose prediction will come true. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, and it's a little more simple than that, but it is the newest phase, and you can do that at 18. Most states don't allow adolescents or young adults to go into casino type gambling until they're 21 and they can bet on the lotteries at 18 or 19, but prediction markets are 18. So as you're in the chat, what did I miss? What are you seeing that's happening that I missed as far as the history and the way that it's changing in the area of adolescent or young adult gambling? So put that in the chat and we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. Next slide. Okay, so here's what research found in 2006, and that was 20 years ago. And the numbers have not changed a great deal. In fact, if anything, they've gotten younger. The average child's first gamble is age 12. That is long before they drink, long before they smoke, long before they have sex. They gamble. And usually they gamble with parents or siblings, but they start at about age 12. Adolescent gambling is a concern because it's solitary, and yet it's very, very out there in the public. And gambling offers youth social activity. And so what we mean by social activity is we know that schools are somewhat cliquey when kids are in school. There's the jocks and there's the band and there's the this and there's the that and there's this club and that club. And so one of the things that is happening with youth gambling is it's very, very social and it's also very solitary at the same time. You are betting, you are betting on whether or not the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, but you're also betting and talking about it with other people who are also betting. Now, the activity is so solitary, but with youth, it is very, very social. It's also a coping mechanism. Gambling has always been a coping mechanism for some. It is an escape for many. It allows them to be by themselves and still be engaged, and it helps them to cope with the trials and tribulations of adolescence. And so it is a coping mechanism that people use because of the fact that the pleasure centers are activated when they gamble. And so it makes them happy. And it makes sad people happier and happy people very, very happy. And so many many adolescents also use gambling because it is fast. It is very speedy. And we first started out gambling 30, 40 years ago, it was very slow. The games took a long time, the poker took a long time, the horse races took a long time, but now we are very, very speedy in the types of games that they play and the micro bets that they make. And this feeds right into the ADHD population of adolescents. So moving on, next slide. I think I have the next one.
I was going to highlight really quickly
Okay, go.
before you move on. It looks like we've got a few responses to what you were asking earlier. If there were
Good.
anything we left out. We had some mentions of youth gambling via video games, which is one I
Yep.
know we've heard a lot about. Lori also shared when she was a high school teacher in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a lot of betting on even high school sports games where students were participating in betting and also kind of pressured if they weren't participating. And lots of
Yes.
promotions and ads for sports betting as well.
Well, we have moved from it being a very solitary process to being mainstream in every community. And adults, adolescents, kids, toddlers are all involved in games and gamification and in being indoctrinated into gambling and being inundated with advertisement that says it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. You can't win if you don't play. And so we have gone from, you know, the play games at night with your parents on Sundays to every day, all day, and very fast. And so as we work through this process, we now have a generation, this is our second generation, where gambling stigma is completely removed. In fact, it's absolutely important in our society. And if you don't think it's important, ask the NBA or the NCAA or the National Football, because gambling is part of their revenue also. So moving on. Adolescent, 10.3% of youth have gambled online. Now, considering that you're not supposed to do that until you're 21, how does that happen? Why don't we have safeguards? Well, the problem is technology is way ahead of safeguards. And so you can, if, you know, I know that at 68 years old, I'm not really good at computers, but I also know that my 17-year-old son or my 27-year-old son or my 37-year-old son also is really good at it. And so they have figured out how to do this online, and they're very good at getting by safeguards. And many times their parents allow them past those safeguards too. So as you look at these statistics, one of the difficulties of this is it was sitting in the realm of the parents, and now it's sitting in the realm of the computer. And so we have really mechanized this process. So 17.9% of youth under the age of 18 have gambled in the last 12 months. What that means is 18% are gambling, and most of them are gambling on a regular basis. So, and online sports gambling is the second most prevalent form of gambling in the last 12 months. And the first is, of course, lottery. So next slide. Now, when we talk about gambling, we also talk about lotteries, bingos. We're talking about scratch offs. We're talking about any form of wagering for where there's an outcome that's not already determined. And here's something that is extremely scary. And from a clinical view, and being a clinician and having a caseload, this is the scariest part. Children introduced to harmless betting, and most parents will say, well, you know, giving him a scratch off, that's pretty harmless. By the age of 12, are 4 times more likely to engage in problem gambling behaviors later in life. And what that means is, let's put that into statistics. The average lifetime is about 6%. In other words, about 6% of the adult population will have a gambling problem at some point in their life. Now, let's compare that with alcohol or drugs, which is about 10%. So we're talking about a little over half of that group of people, which we have entire programs for those. But going back to the statement here, 4 times more likely puts that almost at 24% of people. The earlier they start, more likely they're going to have a problem. And so if people are starting at age 12, they're more likely to exhibit problems in adulthood and early adulthood. And so adolescents whose parents gambled had significantly more positive attitudes towards gambling. In other words, they see it as an okay behavior. Even if, and the research talks about that, even if their parents had a gambling issue, and especially if their parents had a substance abuse issue, gambling becomes an acceptable process. So, and the reason for that is we all know that the brain of an adolescent or a young adult is just not ready to take on healthy versus unhealthy choices and risks. Next slide. I think I'm still up. So
Jerry,
when we
this is
talk
me.
about, is that you?
It
Okay,
is.
go.
You get to take a little break.
All right,
Hello, everyone.
thanks.
Jerry's done a great job of providing some key overview points. Adolescent gambling is fairly popular. There's a lot of aspects about being a teenager that likely promote gambling as a underage person. That can include family features as well as many aspects of being a teenager. Um, and so, just to going to drill deeper into that topic from an adolescent development standpoint. Um, you may know about some recent developments over the last 3 decades or so. One of them is um, the advances in and improvements in neuroimaging, and then that has led adolescent researchers to do a better job of understanding, well, what is the nature or and the process of brain development during the teenage years. Um, and so decades back, it was believed that the brain was pretty much fully developed by the end of childhood and that there wasn't much going on during the adolescent years. But that isn't the case. So, and many of you may know about some of the science. Often it's cited as the adolescent brain doesn't fully develop until about age 25, for example. That's a common number. But what is interesting is the nature or the features of this brain development, and it does help us understand why young people may engage in risky behaviors such as substance use and gambling and other unhealthy choices and decisions. Here's a good metaphor that I like from a developmental psychologist about how to understand this brain development. He talks about it as the gas pedal of the brain is competing with the brake pedal of the brain, and so when you look at the brain development process, it doesn't happen uniformly during the teen years across the brain regions. The back of the brain, which metaphorically is referred to as the gas pedal region, that matures faster than the front of the brain, which has been then referred to as the brake pedal region. So, what's in the back or gas pedal region? Those are the areas of the brain, structures of the brain that give rise to motivation, emotion, those kinds of I call hot features of human existence. The front of the brain, that's related to decision making, resisting impulses, and doing a good job of delaying gratification, or the so-called brakes. So you have this competition, but the back of the brain is gas pedal is kind of winning out over the front of the brain. And so during adolescence, you have this imbalance, and you can imagine then how psychologists have looked at that and said, well, this might help explain why teenagers are more interested in social phenomenon and rewards. They don't consider consequences as much. They're more interested in their friends than their parents when it comes to attitudes and values, may seek novelty over and above common sense, and have a tough time, resisting peer influences. And of course, gambling can enter into the mix. So psychiatrist Tim Fong from UCLA has written and spoken about this topic a lot. And we thought it'd be interesting to show you some of his observations. A teenager's brain doesn't have impulse control. It doesn't have the ability to recover from losses quickly. And he notes that the teen brain probably has a lot of so-called statements, things like, I want fun, I want money, I want excitement, I want things that my friends have. I want to prove that I'm super cool to my friends. And then he notes more specifically about gambling. Teens and young adults who gamble also often inaccurately conflate success in gambling with skill. That last point's quite interesting. It can happen to all individuals who get in trouble with gambling. where you misperceive that the game of luck, when you occasionally win, means that you're actually showing skill. And you can imagine that's a that's a nasty rabbit hole to go down, because if you start to believe that too often, then you decide, well, I'm just going to engage in that game of chance more frequently. You're probably going to keep losing, but you may rely on this false belief that you're actually have enough skill to overcome your losses. And and the notion is that during adolescence, that misperception perhaps is even more common than when you're an adult. So the teen brain is unfortunately vulnerable to all kinds of phenomena that we see in clinics. It's the focus of a lot of prevention programs across the health span, and gambling is part of the mix. Okay, next slide. Jerry, it's back to you.
Okay, so here we go. And this is going to be fairly common in the area of people the young people who are struggling, the dropping grades, the loss of interest. So there's a poll here that I think we're supposed to do right here, and that is, which do you think is the most common problem or the most commonly noted with gambling? So put yourself in the poll and fill it all up.
You see, we've got some responses coming in, so we'll give you guys a second to choose what you think are some of the most common signs.
Okay, ready? Okay, so a lot of you talked about grades and loss of underinterest and co-occurring substance use. But one of the things that people don't don't notice, but that is very important, is excessive talk of sports or sports-related activity or gambling activity. One of the things that's different between adults and adolescents in the area of gambling, adults keep their gambling very quiet. They don't tell you how much they're betting. They don't tell you how often they're betting. They will tell you occasionally when they win. They won't tell you about their losses. Adolescents and young adults talk about it. They don't see it as something that they shouldn't talk about. They don't understand that it is an issue for them. And so all of these things are true. All 1 through 8 are all true. Uh, but one of the things that if you're walking down the halls and you hear kids talking about sports and sports gambling and how much, you'll hear them say, well, I got 2,200 on this, or, well, they won't say 2,200, but they'll say, 22 on this, or I got this much on this, or I bet on this and I hit this and I did this, because they talk about that with their peers and they don't see it as something that should be hidden. So, it's very important that we look at this also because there's a co-occurring law.
Jerry, I think your audio may have cut out. I'm not sure if anyone else was having troubles hearing
Okay.
you, but
Yeah.
I am as well. Mhm.
My internet's unstable. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Now you're back.
Okay. So to reiterate real quickly, these are all very, very good signs of youth gambling, but the one that's most overlooked, but that's very easy to spot, is excessive talk about sports or gambling related activities. They don't understand that, like adults, that they should keep this quiet because they'll get themselves in trouble. They see it as very social and they have a clique of people that they are involved with, and they will talk about this. And if you're walking along the hall, you will hear that. You'll hear them talk about sports. You will hear them talk about how much they wagered and how much they won and how much they lost because it's very social and it puts them on top of their clique. Next.
Wait, Jerry, before you go on, quick
Yep.
question for you in a
Yep.
group. What's your observations about the relative prevalence of gambling and gambling issues when you look at boys versus girls?
Oh, well, it's a two-thirds, one-third thing. It used to be mostly all males, but now we're getting into the world where young women are also getting involved. Two things about that. Uh, First of all, uh, it's sports has always been a male activity, so to speak, but it's not anymore. And gambling has always been a male activity. It's not anymore. And so we have a lot of males, young males that are getting involved, and they get involved basically a lot earlier than the females. But as we go through this, and as the stigma gets uh, obliterated, you're going to find more and more females talking about gambling and talking, and especially early on because sports is big for adolescents. They're getting involved too, and they're also getting involved in online gambling and online gaming slash gambling. So
Yeah.
it's starting to move itself into everyone and not just males.
Excellent.
That's you.
I think I'm going to move us now to an opportunity for everyone to weigh in with a case that I've compiled from an individual who's a 20-year-old male, and I was able to obtain several features about his sports betting. And so the hope is we'll get some discussion about what you see as possible risk factors and maybe entry points if you were to talk to this individual about how they might gain some insight that there could be perhaps some issues with his sports betting. So there's two columns here. On the left is some general features of his sports betting, and on the right, drilled a little more specifically about issues that pertain to his relationship with his girlfriend and gambling. So let me just read you the 7 features on the left first. So he is a big NFL bettor. He's in a betting club with a small group of friends. He began at about age 17. So he's got that social connection, age 17. Not the earliest of onset. Sometimes you get plenty of onset younger than that, but it's in the teen years. So how much does he bet? So on average, about commitment of $500 per season to play the betting club activities. So that NFL season, as some of you may know, can last 18 to 20 weeks. There's likely betting every week. One can win up to 5,000 if you're in that club. He hasn't hit that mark yet, but my guess is that's a number that he's often thought about. He goes past the betting club and does additional betting with one of the online services, DraftKings. He has to get assistance from an older friend. He's not one of those that's figured out how to get around the minimum age issue, so he gets an older friend to help. During the NFL season, he spends a portion of his free time researching, he calls it, the games at hand. And he admits that sometimes he prioritizes this over spending time with his girlfriend. By the way, great point. It's someone just raised the issue about it being very similar to fantasy sports betting. A quote from him, I will never bet more than I can afford to lose. That's an interesting perspective. A lot of gamblers would say that when that might not be true. He does not report his net gambling winnings to the IRS. Okay, another interesting feature. Characteristics of his gambling life that's related to his relationship with his girlfriend. Here are three that I identified. He has complained to his girlfriend a lot that his home state does not permit legal sports betting. Maybe you know that about half the country, maybe now we're past a half, have legalized sports betting. And then, of course, most of them that have done the legal form, they're then moving into should we have it online or not, which I understand KC, Kansas City, or Kansas, has already moved towards. He doesn't disclose to his girlfriend about his wins and losses. And then when asked by others about that, he indicates, well, he's not sure how the girlfriend would feel if she knew about the extent of his betting. So he's a little uncomfortable about talking to his girlfriend about it. And he's admitted to a friend that he's not sure she would approve or not. Okay, so several features. Next slide is a chance to get us into a small discussion. So I'm hoping these three questions would trigger some comments in the chat, or feel free to unmute if you'd like to verbalize some thoughts. So here are the three questions. So what early risk factors did you see in the list that might indicate that this person has an issue with gambling? What role or roles do peers and the social feature of his gambling play in either maintaining or escalating his behavior? And specifically, do you have other assessment ideas in an effort to identify if he's just a recreational gambler or gambling at a risky level? So that last question is, if you looked at all the features, what might you follow up with an inquiry with the person to help figure out, okay, maybe that's just kind of normal, healthy, low level recreational gambling, or is there some risk involved? So those are the three. Feel free to weigh in on any of them. Haley's going to go, or Lori's going to go to the next slide and show the list again. So here's the list so that you can see this. So the questions: risk factor, peer influence, and how might you further delve into any of these features in an effort to figure out, okay, if we got just a healthy so-called recreational gambler or someone that might have crossed the line a bit.
I've got those questions that you had. Ken, I went ahead and pasted those in the chat. Looks like Renee responded that this individual is hiding it from the girlfriend and also not reporting to IRS. So again, kind of hiding information related to betting.
Excellent. I agree. Those are, I'll call it red flag signs. Being open about it, being okay about it, realizing, okay, there's a legal issue when you have winnings with the IRS. All of that, whether you engage in the so-called pro-social direction with that, or if you go in the, I'll call it the hiding, non-disclosure direction, those I think are red versus green signs.
Looks like Gianna also mentioned an early age to start gambling. So I know you said this individual is 20 now, but started at the age of 17.
Right.
Also,
apparently, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we also have spending a significant amount of time focusing on it. That was one that stood out to me as well, kind of spending time researching, as you put it, different games and opportunities to bet.
When this happens with substance use, when somebody's use starts to narrow their behavior around substance use, and it means then they're spending less time or they're ignoring other responsibilities or other aspects of their life, a sign of loss of control. It's a sign that the drug use is becoming a problem. That shows up with gambling. So people that get indulgent with the gambling activity, they start to narrow their life so much around that they're avoiding, they're missing, they're spending less time with things that perhaps they should spend time with. So if he's prioritizing part of his life at the expense of his girlfriend because he's indulgent with gambling, that would be a red flag. I wanted to mention one thing about early onset. Jerry did a good job of noting just how common it's becoming with young people. I think nowadays, with current phenomenon that we live in, virtually all adults who have a gambling problem started when they were young. It's very rare to have a very late onset. So it's sets the groundwork, unfortunately.
The something that we talked that they already talked about was keeping it from the girlfriend. That's one of the criteria, lying to others, and keeping it from them is in fact not honest. And so if he says, I it's not a problem, I'm okay with it, I never bet more than I intend to, but I don't tell my girlfriend, there's a disconnect there. And so one of the things that as a clinician that I would do is say, walk me through that disconnect of I don't bet more than I can afford, but
Yeah.
I don't want to tell
Right.
people how much I bet. Why?
Yeah. No, exactly. How uncomfortable would you be if you decided to bring it up with her? So let's talk about what you could say, and then of course you can get an idea of perhaps from the individual that, well, no, he really, or that person really doesn't want to talk to his girlfriend about it, or he might even have to admit, well, okay, maybe I do bet more than I can afford, maybe I do lose a lot, I just don't want her to know. I don't want her to keep tabs on my behavior, because if I bring it up, then maybe she's going to worry, and it'll too often be a common topic and perhaps a source of disagreement. All of those things can give you a sign of whether the individual is um, uh, perhaps crossing a line, and may even realize he has some habits that he's uncomfortable with.
I see we also had in the chat kind of regarding question 2, what role peer influencers were playing. Rosalie pointed out that he was using an older friend to help bet through DraftKings, which I thought was a good point as well.
Right. So as there's sort of a concept of poly gambling. Someone can play the lottery, they sports bet, and they go to casinos. When you see that kind of pattern, that would also suggest someone is perhaps moving into a gambling problem. This individual, it's still sports betting, but he likely wasn't getting enough satisfaction just with the betting club, and so needed, one might think, of a little bit more juice, a little bit more of a fix, and so wanted to get that from DraftKings. Unfortunately, the online world, DraftKings and FanDuel, the two big ones, I guess MGM Bet might be the third biggest. They just provide such an easy route to gambling. They've engineered those features to entice, to encourage maintenance, and unfortunately to perhaps lead a lot of people that were just in it for a little fun to get into a problem level. Jerry, you must also have a few thoughts about the whole online world and how it's
Well,
great.
first of all, I want to talk about, he started betting at 17. And then for those of you in the substance use world, you know that increased tolerance, increased use is a sign. Well, here we go from 17 in a club to 17 to age 20 and a club and this. So there's additional to get the same the same juice out of it, the same thrill out of it. He's increasing, and that's one of the criteria. And as a clinician, that would just pop up in my head saying, okay, you started here and now you're here. And so he's moving down that risk factor process. And he's starting to do what he had with friends, and now he's moving into the online world, which is which is much faster and much more dangerous. People who are betting online have at least 2 times, if not 3 times, more likely to have a problem than people who don't bet online.
So Jerry has highlighted a great answer to the question. If you wanted to assess more about his features to see to what extent there might be a problem, he's nailed it with getting clarification about and a description about how he started, but how it's accelerated. And that acceleration likely was a phenomenon of tolerance. It has behavioral addictions have the same kind of tolerance phenomenon. Obviously, it's a little different than the psychoactive or substance use-based tolerance, but you still see the phenomenon. You also see withdrawal. If when people who have engaged in a lot of gambling and then either self or with counseling decide to pull back or stop use, they can experience various psychological, emotional type withdrawal symptoms. So interesting, behavioral addictions do mimic in many ways our understanding of substance use addictions. Excellent. Haley and Lori, more in the chat box to profile? Or should we move to
Yeah, I think
our
we got a good coverage of it. I know your third question was focusing on kind of how to assess if the use was at a risky level. So I think kind of jumping into the screening is a great next step.
Just one reminder, because somebody brought up the issue of the girlfriend. That would be another way to assess. Ask, as Jerry said, get into more detail with, so what would that be like if you talk to her about it? What are your concerns? What's the advantages of talking about it? Because there might be some. And then that could tell you more about, again, does this person really need to hide it because that person's even aware that there are some issues at hand. We want to give you some tools, and one of them is to help with the screening process. So I'm going to walk you through some suggestions about how to introduce screening and then point you to a couple standardized tools. So it can help when you want to go down this road to make sure the person understands what's meant by gambling. I think it can also help to have a slight conversation after you get into some of the introductory questions I'll show you in a minute. And then the second phase would be to continue with a standardized problem-based screening tool. And there are 2 good ones out there that are useful for young people called the LIBET and the Brief Biopsychosocial Gambling Screen, or I'm just going to refer to it as the BB. So you can see brief items for both. I'll show you those in a minute. Well, let's go to the next slide. So how might you start it? I think as either with an interview, or if you want to print this out, you get the person to open up their thinking to what gambling means, because sometimes the people aren't sure that what they're engaging in is gambling. They might just think it's some kind of social betting game, but it really is gambling. So, for example, you indicate to the person that with the next set of questions, gambling means all kinds of things like buying lottery tickets, gambling at a casino, playing cards or dice for money, betting on sports games, betting on esports. We didn't talk about that, but that's a new phenomenon. Playing slots, video poker, or other video gaming, gambling on the internet, betting on horses or dogs, or playing bingo or pull tab. So there's a lot there. And then so one way to nail it down, because with young people, I think it makes sense to think about a 12-month time window. And so ask the person if they've done any of that type of gambling 5 or more times in the past 12 months. If it's below 5, I don't think it merits perhaps going any further. But anyway, so let's say you get a yes there. Hit to the next slide. You'll see where I'm taking this a little further. So I think it can make sense to have a brief conversation if there's a yes. I've got 3 suggested follow-up questions. What's your favorite gambling activity? Get the person to talk about that. And then these 2 can be useful if you eventually want to engage the person in thinking about behavior change. What are good things about gambling? Why do you like to place bets? And what are there not so good things about it? What is the downside? Jerry mentioned this earlier. Adolescent gambling can be thought through the lens of all kinds of functional value, coping, to have fun, social benefits, psychological issues. It can help to get an understanding of that, and you might be able to pull some insight from your young person when you ask about what are the good things about gambling. You can use the answer, though, to the good things and the bad things if you want to engage the person a little bit further in a brief conversation. More on that after I just finish our screening discussion. And then the recommendation is you would administer a nice, short, validated screening tool. So let's show you the live bet and the BB. So next screen shows you the live bet. On the left, I just got brief note. It's a 2-item questionnaire. You can download a version of it. I've got what's there from the Oregon folks. But if you Google live bet, you get several options. But on the right, I have what is downloadable from the one I found. And you can just see the 2 questions right there in the middle. Have you ever had to lie to people important to you about how much you gambled? That might be the fear of our case discussion. And have you ever felt the need to bet more and more money? So the lie is about realizing you had to mislead someone about your betting behavior. And the bet part of the questionnaire is this tolerance issue about betting more and more. Here we just list money. It could be just betting more and more days in a week, for example. But these 2 are part of diagnostic criteria for nowadays it's called gambling disorder, and they are quite predictive. So while the criteria span across many features, these 2 work quite well. And the notion is if there's a yes on one or both of them, a follow-up is merited. And at the bottom, way at the bottom, is the National Problem Gambling Helpline, 1-800-RESET, which is a good place to point an individual. It's a national helpline, but it really is a national hub, a one-stop hub for anyone in the country, because the helpline directs individuals to state-specific resources. And my understanding is in Kansas, there's plenty of specific resources. So an individual from Kansas could call that, and they'd get pointed to relevant help. Next slide, please. Then this shows you the BB. This is expanded a little bit. It's 3 items. My download is an example from Harvard's version of it. During the past 12 months, have you become restless, irritable, or anxious when trying to stop or cut down on gambling? So that's a withdrawal-like item. During the past 12 months, have you tried to keep your family or friends from knowing how much you gambled? So that's, in one sense, the lying or deceiving people about your behavior. during the past 12 months, did you have such financial trouble as a result of your gambling that you had to get help with living expenses from family, friends, or welfare? So there's an example where the person has lost so much money that they're now having some financial consequences. And this screen also recommends, if you get a yes to any of the three, it's warranted to call the National Gambling Helpline, and there you can get some follow-up services. Next slide. I see we only have 4 minutes to go. I just want to remind everyone that this is a helpful resource slide. So we put together 5 resources. The top one is very specific to Kansas. You have your own state level group to help with problem gambling, the Kansas Coalition. Their website has a lot of different resources for you, including pointing you to the 100 My Reset phone number for those that want to get some follow-up counseling. The other resources are national. The second one is the Gambling Helpline. So in any state, if you dial the reset, they'll direct you to the state-specific help. And the bottom 3 have a mix of alerts to webinars, to national conferences, to downloadable resources, and anyone who's interested in getting training to be a counselor to sharpen your skills to help, whether it's young people or adults with a gambling problem. I mentioned way back that if you want to engage a person into behavior change, the questions about why do you like to gamble? What do you find fun or enjoyable about it? What are the rewards? And then also asking, what have you found to be the downside, can be a way to start a motivational interviewing type conversation. Some of you perhaps have had training with this particular counseling approach. It's a nice interviewing style that helps, I think, move along the behavior change process pretty quickly with individuals. It works great with teams. Here are 4 resources. All of them have a mix of basic to advanced understanding about how to learn motivational interviewing techniques and how you can integrate it into your clinical toolbox. The third one is very specific to addressing the use of motivational interviewing techniques for young people.
Thank you so much for all of those resources, Ken. I do want to highlight, we will share all of the links and slides and everything with you all following the session. I know we are at the top of the hour, so we do have kind of a quick wrap-up slide. I'm just going to pop in if you all don't mind. Really kind of looking at what the effect of today's learning is, really looking at how to address early signs of gambling problems in youth as a public health priority. And how to apply best practices when screening and counseling youth about gambling related issues. So I just want to say thank you so much both to Jerry and Ken for all of your hard work on the presentation and all of the information that you shared with us. I also want to say thank you all to you guys in the chat and everyone who joined us today for registering and being a part of the series and today's session. As part of the series, we do have our next session upcoming, so I just wanted to share that briefly. Our next session is going to take place on Wednesday the 28th at noon Central. Our topic is what happens next, supporting kids after trauma from initial report to care. So we really hope that you'll join us as Austin McGuire and Jenny Stroop dive deeper into the topic. And then regarding today's session, we do want to give you a chance to let us know your thoughts and what you thought about the training. So I just dropped a link in the chat. There's also a QR code on the screen. This will take you to a brief post survey. So really want to hear all about what you thought about the training and ways that we could make it more meaningful and impactful for you as well. This link will also be shared in our follow-up email along with all of the slides, resources, and everything that Jerry and Ken shared with us today. So again, I just want to say thank you, Jerry and Ken, and thank you all to joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time on May 28th at 12 p.m. Thank you guys so much.